Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are jumping right into the massive Taylor Farms iceberg lettuce outbreak. We're going to completely unpack how a public health event of this scale actually moves through a super complex international supply chain. We'll look at the science, the timeline, and really see what happens when our regulatory system is put to the ultimate test. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. 9,481. Just wrap your head around that number for a second. That's the latest reported count of lab-confirmed illnesses directly tied to this specific iceberg lettuce outbreak. Now, the CDC does point out that this is part of broader national investigations, but that staggering figure, that is directly linked to the recalled supply we're looking at today.
And look, behind that massive number is a very real, very severe human toll. We aren't just talking about a mild stomach bug here. We're looking at 398 hospitalizations and really tragically 2 reported deaths in Michigan. Oh, and this spanned an incredible 17 states. That kind of spread is exactly why this demands our attention. We have to understand how our food systems manage or sometimes, honestly, miss these massive biological risks.
So what's the actual biological threat we're dealing with? It's called Cyclospora. Basically, it's this microscopic parasite that causes severe gastrointestinal illness. Think prolonged diarrhea, intense stomach cramps, bloating, and severe dehydration. It's awful. And what makes this parasite incredibly tricky is its vehicle, raw iceberg lettuce. Because we eat it raw, and because it moves so fast across countless restaurants, it's pretty much the perfect, stealthy vessel for a pathogen to just travel totally undetected.
Right, so how did investigators actually connect the dots? It's not like they magically stumbled upon contaminated lettuce sitting in a factory somewhere. No, it's like a giant puzzle. They started with step 1, epidemiology. That means interviewing patients to find common exposures. Once they found a link, they moved to step 2, traceback. They literally followed the supply chain backward using shipping records. And finally, all that exhaustive data led to step 3, a total convergence on shredded iceberg lettuce supplied by Taylor Farms to Mexico to Taco Bell locations.
Which brings us to a really pivotal date, July 17, 2026. As soon as the traceback converged on their supply, Taylor Farms to Mexico initiated a voluntary recall of all their iceberg lettuce sourced from central Mexico. This was a massive recall, hitting specific food service items and even certain market-side products over at Walmart. And it's really important to point out that this isn't just a classic story of regulators pointing fingers at some uncooperative company. Taylor Farms actively participated in this recall process to swiftly pull the product from the U.S. market. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is one of the strangest twists in the entire investigation. On July 18th, an FDA sample of the lettuce was initially reported as testing positive for Cyclospora. But then, shortly after, laboratory experts retracted it. It was actually a false positive. You'd probably think, well, that ruins the whole investigation, right? Nope. The robust epidemiology and traceback data remained completely unchanged. They kept pointing directly and accurately at the lettuce from central Mexico.
But let's map this timeline out, though, because this is where the regulatory system really starts taking heat from the public. Okay, so the voluntary recall kicked off on July 17th. The false positive happened the very next day. Yet, and this is wild, FDA investigators didn't arrive on site for a physical inspection at the processing facility in Mexico until the week of August 10 through 14. Just look at that gap. That is nearly a full month between pulling the product from American shelves and regulators actually stepping foot inside the facility. So why does that month-long delay matter so much? Well, it perfectly highlights the huge difference between the early phase of the investigation and the later phase. See, epidemiology and traceback are super data-driven. They rely on patient interviews and paper trails to find the source. But a physical investigation, that requires inspectors to literally be on the ground. They have to collect environmental samples, check sanitation practices, and evaluate the agricultural water out in the fields. Essentially, a traceback tells you where the lettuce came from, but a physical inspection is required to tell you how it actually got contaminated.
And wow, here is a detail that completely shifts our perspective. Reporting by CBS revealed that the specific Mexican facility connected to this massive outbreak hadn't been physically inspected in the previous 7 years. 7 years. Now, to be fair, a lack of recent inspections doesn't automatically mean a facility is ignoring safety rules. But man, it really forces us to zoom out from the micro details of this one lettuce outbreak to the macro, systemic issues facing our entire food supply. Like, does the regulatory system even have the capacity to investigate major foreign supply chain problems quickly? And this brilliantly illustrates the systemic math problem we're dealing with. The numbers here tell a very clear story.
The U.S. imports enormous quantities of fresh produce to meet our year-round consumer demand, right? With Mexico now accounting for more than 20% of total U.S. food imports. But against that massive and growing volume, FDA foreign facility inspections actually declined by 13% in 2025, and that's alongside reductions in overall FDA employment. We literally have increasing import volumes colliding head-on with shrinking inspection capacity. That equation just puts unbelievable pressure on the whole food safety system.
And when you have that much pressure, combined with delays in getting inspectors on the ground, the job becomes exponentially harder. Because, let's be real, an inspection can't just magically reconstruct past events. By the time investigators finally arrive weeks later, the contaminated product is long gone, so they're forced to piece together faint clues, evaluating agricultural water usage, reviewing sanitation systems, harvesting practices, storage, and transportation logs. Contamination often happens so far from where we actually eat the food, making this an incredibly complex puzzle to solve weeks after the fact.
Now, during this investigative lag time, the public often gets really confused by the news. You might see the case count constantly ticking up, and naturally panic, assuming the dangerous lettuce is still out there at the grocery store. But actually, the FDA states it can take up to 6 weeks for public health authorities to confirm and attribute cases. So a rising case count, that's mostly just delayed data reporting. Since the best buy dates have long passed, those recalled products are absolutely no longer on store shelves or in restaurants. It simply takes time to identify the people who were exposed weeks ago.
Adding to all this complexity and public scrutiny, there was actually a second development during this exact same period. Taylor Farms initiated a completely separate recall for jalapenos sourced from Sinaloa, Mexico, due to potential salmonella contamination. Now, let's be absolutely clear on this. 0 illnesses have been tied to those jalapenos and involves a totally distinct pathogen and grower. But still, having dual, back-to-back incidents involving the same major company and Mexican produce suppliers, yeah, that severely intensifies the scrutiny on their supply chain and the agencies trying to monitor it.
So how do we evaluate the system's overall performance here? Well, let's look at both sides, starting with what we can call the bull case. Objectively speaking, the U.S. food safety system did work in several vital ways. The epidemiological and traceback efforts successfully identified a common source. Taco Bell quickly stopped using the implicated lettuce, Taylor Farms voluntarily recalled the product, and the FDA and CDC remained highly active throughout. Ultimately, the hazardous product was effectively removed from the market. So the system didn't entirely fail. It successfully executed its job of containment.
But then we have the bear case, which paints a much more concerning picture. The structural vulnerabilities here are glaring. Just like we talked about with that import data, we're seeing declining foreign inspection capacity paired with surging import volumes. This creates a really dangerous over-reliance on reactive post-outbreak investigations instead of proactive safety inspections. And honestly, when an outbreak of this scale happens, it triggers massive economic ripple effects. Restaurants pull ingredients, suppliers lose contracts, and consumers completely lose trust. Reacting after thousands of people get sick is just far more costly than preventing it in the first place.
So the crucial point is, where do we go from here? What actually happens next? Well, we need to watch 3 critical phases. Step 1, we must analyze the physical inspection results from Mexico once the FDA officially concludes and publishes them. Step 2, we have to keep monitoring the outbreak data to ensure the case counts truly stabilize and no new exposures are happening. And Step 3, we need to see if this triggers real supply chain and regulatory responses. Like, will companies and regulators finally change how they handle traceability, sanitation, and rapid foreign inspections? We'll have to see. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. The recalled lettuce is gone, and the numbers will eventually settle down. But the fundamental issue remains. How did an outbreak affecting thousands of people move so stealthily through a massive global supply chain, and what absolutely must change so we can respond faster next time? In our modern, globalized food system, the distance between a farm and your dinner plate is enormous. But when something goes wrong, the time available to find the answer is vanishingly small. Thanks for joining me on this one. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.